Hey, Sunny. Long time no see. For those of you listening, I think Sunny needs not much of an introduction as he's the co-founder of Osmosis. But for me, I think he was also somebody that I looked up to when I was in university, seeing someone working in a fully decentralized world. I think back then you were at Tendermint, helping kind of pave the way for a lot of us to think about decentralized and proof of stake worlds. And so I think maybe that's a good segue for you to share a little bit more about what is osmosis for those of the audience that's a little bit less familiar with what you guys do and what kind of inspired you to start out in trying to build this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks guys for having me on. This is my second event, and so really excited to be back again. So Osmosis is a DEX app chain, which means it is a decentralized exchange and DeFi platform built as its own custom blockchain. We're built using the Cosmos SDK stack. But what this basically allows us to do is have a lot of flexibility to go in and modify not just the application logic, but also chain logic to best meet the needs of the DeFi applications built on top of the chain.
Awesome. Yeah, so I've personally obviously used Osmosis, and I think one of the things I really enjoy is being able to, access all of the different Cosmos app chains that I might have assets in from just one front end interface and be able to pretty easily, access all of these different assets that I have. I think previously this year, last year, you actually published a retrospective on all things Osmosis. Did you want to share a little bit more of what else have you guys built so far in this almost first half year of 2023?
Yeah, a lot of stuff been being built in the first half so far. Our biggest focus has been shipping our concentrated liquidity and order books. So, those are ready to go live basically in the next month. They're concentrated liquidity will be going live in the next 1 month. Very similar to Uniswap V3 with a few modifications. But yeah, that basically is under audit right now. And so, yeah, looking forward to that. And then on top of that will be this thing we built called loot books, which is this idea of like overlaying a CLOB, a central limit order book, on top of concentrated liquidity systems. And so you'll get the best of both worlds, sort of like AMMs and order books into a single market structure. So that's been, number one focus. But on top of that, there's been a bunch of other stuff been being built. So one that's going live soon as well is called Cosmos Swap. Cosmos Swap is this today, for anyone who's used Osmosis, like the UX is very much like a centralized exchange where you have to you deposit assets onto the Osmosis chain using IBC. You do your trading on the Osmosis chain, and then when you're done, you can withdraw assets off.
Back out.
And so, yeah, exactly. And this is a common UX flow that a lot of people are used to. But with Cosmos Swap, this is a sort of a separate product that is meant to be more like a shapeshift style experience, where it's like, oh, you have an asset on one chain, you want an asset on a different chain. You might not even have an Osmosis account at all, but you just want to one click. It will transfer it to Osmosis, do the swap, and then transfer it to the destination all in a single transaction. The user never had to have an Osmosis account or anything in the middle. So that's sort of the that so that product will be launching as well in the coming weeks. So that's been the other sort of main big development. And then on top of that, a lot of the focus has just been around ecosystem growth. So, our view has always been like, look, spot trading is one of the components that's needed in, if you go look at a centralized exchange, you look at Binance or Coinbase, right? Yes, spot trading is one of the functionalities that they do, but they also do other stuff. They do margin trading, they do perps, they do launch pads. And so getting the suite of products that's necessary for a full exchange experience onto one platform. That's sort of been the other main focus of the last 6 months. And so we've started to see the first steps of that happening, where you have Mars protocol, which is a lending protocol, has launched. You have Stream Swap, which is a launch pad. You have Quasar, which is like this vaults product. Then there's like a couple of product people building perps that will be launching in coming weeks. And so yeah, there's a couple more products launching in the coming weeks as well. So, but yeah, we're really starting to see the shift of Osmosis from just the spot DEX into a more of a full-fledged DeFi ecosystem.
Awesome. Love it. I totally agree with the kind of expansion to be able to cover a lot more trading use cases as well. I've noticed that obviously back at Binance, like you said, we got to be on the other side of trying to build out a lot of these different products. And I think it took time. Like, of course, we had to start with spot before we could have futures, margin, like you said, and other product lines. So I think that that's quite interesting of a context. And I think we'll touch a bit on that app chain thesis as well, and how I think Osmosis kind of plays a very valuable role in allowing for other folks to specialize in what they do. But I guess to just close off the kind of Osmosis design side of things, are there any particular differentiating factors that you guys are able to achieve that maybe other AMMs or other clubs cannot do once you have this new version that has the best of both worlds, as you mentioned?
Yeah, I mean, the main benefit here is that people will be able to aggregate liquidity from both, like, the limit orders that market makers are used to placing and have algorithms for, as well as the passive, more passive contrary liquidity systems that more retail users prefer to LP through. And then, like, some of the things that we are, can do with Osmosis as the app chain, like one of the big ones right now is this thing called fee abstraction, where we let users pay their transaction fees in any token they want. This has been a big issue with all existing blockchains, is that you need to have a specific token to pay fees in, and this is actually a huge UX hurdle. On top of that, we're doing other cool stuff with fee markets as well, where it's like, oh, okay, look, like if you have a certain amount of like trading volume, you can get like reduced fees on the transaction fee amount. We like can do things using like different Sybil resistance mechanisms, using device IDs to give people free trading, free gas credits, basically. So I think fixing the gas UX is definitely a big one. But then on top of that, also stuff that we're doing with like privacy like anti front running privacy, as well as like on-chain privacy. These are things you need to go like edit the state machine in order to do.
Gotcha. Very cool. Yeah. So I think kind of tying back to all things Cosmos, I think you've been one of the biggest champions for all things Tendermint and Cosmos since I've ever heard of Cosmos. And so I think one of the things that still a lot of people don't fully grasp is some of the app chain thesis. And I think maybe it would be helpful for you to share a little bit of your perspective, given that you've spent basically your entire last, 6 years in a very Tendermint and Cosmos heavy world. How do you kind of see the app chain thesis play out and replacing monolithic chains that are very focused on trying to do everything decently well versus folks that want to build specific use cases of blockchain in their business models?
Yeah. I think it's definitely going to be like a world of both. Like, it's not a one or the other. And I think it really depends along the application of like, which use case are we talking about here, right? Like, so I think, you see things like DYDX clearly shifting towards like an app chain model of things, right? Because they need to like high performance engineer their order books and stuff to achieve what they're trying to do. Then you also, one of the interesting things I see actually might be playing out is you have these like coalition chains almost, where like you have like, it's in a way you can think of it, that's how Osmosis is kind of developing as well, where it's like, okay, a lot of these DeFi products that are being built on top are not solely built by the Osmosis dev team, but rather by like a coalition of projects. But like these are all projects that sort of agree to work closely with each other and make sure there's like a good unified UX around them. So you have things like Osmosis and Mars as the lending protocol, and like so like okay, these things are actually way more deeply intertwined and like taking advantage of each other's benefits. So you know, especially if you just focus on like the DeFi world, like yeah, I think these like coalition chains is sort of where we're starting to see where
Federations.
yeah, federations almost, yeah, like uh groups of DeFi projects that compose deeply into each other and into the chain underneath.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess given that Osmosis helps provide a lot of trading venues for so many different assets within the Cosmos ecosystem, do you kind of see Osmosis as a maybe I'll call it a conduit of value inside the ecosystems that you see spun up, because it's so easy to have someone's own Tendermint consensus running in their own app chain?
Yeah, I mean, uh can you define what you mean by conduit of value?
I would say like you're trying to also be a little bit of just the public transit system for people to move between value of any of these different ecosystems.
Yeah, definitely. Like you know, making it so people like as an example, right? There's a fiat on ramp called Cato. What they're doing is supporting fiat on ramping for any asset, like almost any asset in Cosmos. But how they're doing it is instead of having to find like market maker liquidity providers on like the back end to like provide anything, they are only on off ramping from fiat into USDC and then swapping on osmosis into any Cosmos asset and then sending it to the destination chain. And you can even trigger so it does an action. So like, let's say on Stargaze, you want to buy an NFT with fiat. You could do that, but what it will do is it will route those swaps into stars through osmosis. So yeah, like it is sort of acting as the economic bridge between all of these app chains right now. And it was, starting with Cosmos right now, but like the goal is and has always been to like expand to more than just Cosmos. Like that's why, like, if you go on Osmosis today, like we actually have assets from like many ecosystems other than Cosmos, right? We have like obviously a bunch of assets from the ETH ecosystem, but we also have Matic and AVAX and DOT and Filecoin and like so part of the goal here is to like be the best place for people to trade assets from. Most dexes are focused on like a single ecosystem. We're trying to be like, we're not trying to really capture the tail end of ERC20s on every platform ecosystem, but rather focus on like the major assets, L1 assets from like the base assets of different blockchains.
Totally. Yeah, I think that's a great segue because I did also see your announcement recently with the collaboration with Avalanche as well. I actually have, I guess, spoken to you long time ago, I guess, about Peggy and different things that were Ethermint back then, right? And so on and so forth to try and bind more interoperability across Cosmos and EVM ecosystems. But kind of curious to maybe hear a little bit more about specifically what you guys have done to bring in more compatibility with other chain ecosystems.
Yeah, so we've been working very closely with the Axelar team, which is like a team that it's a Cosmos-based blockchain, but it lets you bridge, connect to EVM chains right now, and then working on others as well. But like, yeah, end goal, state of the world is I believe everything will use IBC as a way of connecting blockchains. But in the medium term, while we're working towards that, and there are actually a number of teams. There's like at least three or four teams who are working on IBC implementations for Ethereum and L2s. But until then, Axelar sort of acts as like, okay, this is the way that we like bridge to these different ecosystems. And so, yeah, through them is how we've been able to get access to all of these like other other assets from Ethereum and other EVM chains.
Very cool. And I'd be remiss to not mention that Axelar is in the SCB 10X portfolio. So I believe there's another panel. I think maybe it's already happened or it's coming soon with Jake from Axelar and some other folks, Sergey, so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm actually really happy to hear about some of these expansions, because I think it's really important. If I'll use the public transportation analogy a little bit more, right? That in a way, the public transit system of Osmosis now just serves more stops. And I think that's always powerful for users to have more flexibility of the different ecosystems and chains that they can bring value to and from. So I guess kind of looking forward, right, for the rest of the year to come. I think you guys obviously have quite a few tech upgrades and new things that are always coming up in the roadmap. Are there any particular things that you would like us to start getting ready for? And are there things maybe later, I would love to hear a little bit more on how you see that fits in with some of the kind of newer waves of, I think you mentioned some privacy stuff. Obviously, we're seeing it across the whole sector, more ZK related initiatives, more rollups, more account abstraction and MPC side of things, wallet safety and ease of use to onboard the next wave of users. I think SEB, we had an event a few weeks back for seeing the next billion of users come to crypto. I would love to hear a little bit more about how some of the upcoming roadmap items like the, I'm sorry, I forgot the name of combining the CLOB and the AMM side of things to see how that can improve the liquidity experience for all users.
Yeah, so, our take has always been we need to like figure out for DEXs to really work. There's like the UX right now is just so much worse than centralized exchanges. And our internal mission statement at Osmosis right now is like, by the time the next bull run comes around, new crypto entrants should be able to onboard into Osmosis directly, not Coinbase. And because how we see it, what happens right now is like every time there's a bull run, there's all these new entrants that enter crypto, but like they buy something on Coinbase, and that's where for like 95% of users, that's where their journey ends, right? And it's like that we're not actually onboarding people into DeFi and into like decentralized systems. And so how do we do that? And so I think we're trying to focus on like, okay, what are the things that like the centralized exchanges actually do better? And I think like there's a number of them, but I think like definitely two of them that are really important is the fiat on-ramps and the custody systems. So like the fiat on-ramps, like, this, like I mentioned, we're working with Cato, and how do we make this as seamless as possible, really feel like a centralized exchange style fiat on-ramping experience for users. And then with the custody, like, yeah, one of my big focuses right now is like account abstraction. How do we like make it so users can log in with Google, log in with, there's some cool stuff you can do with like, I mentioned this briefly earlier, but like using Apple device IDs, where like, all Apple devices have secure enclaves in them that have cryptographic key material. And like, you can do stuff where like, we've been experimenting with like, oh, okay, instead of like signing transactions using like a ledger and stuff, you can just like use your fingerprint sensor on your Mac or your Face ID on your phone as the like authentication system. And so yeah, I've really just focused on like, how do we do, get rid of this world where, you go on any Web2 app, the first thing you were supposed to do is not go download a browser extension and write down like these words in a secure place. It's like, that's just silly, right? And so like really trying to solve those two problems are sort of what going to be our big focus for the second half of 2023 once concentrated liquidity is live.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I think kind of tying back to one of the things that you mentioned earlier with regards to Axelar and some of the interoperability of assets, I guess IBC becoming Cosmos compatible, if I'm not mistaken, or already, IBC compatible, or if it's already become IBC compatible, how do you see that being kind of relevant to making it easier for users to get exactly the the assets that they want in whatever chain that they might need it in.
Yeah, so I think Ethereum being more IBC compatible. So yeah, there's a couple of the teams working on it. There's Polymers, Electron Labs, Union. There might be Synced as well. And so the benefit here is like, currently we put a lot of trust in these like bridges, and they have these economic assumptions. The point of IBC is saying, hey, how do we get rid of additional trust assumptions that only use the trust assumptions of the blockchains themselves and use like actual light client proofs. So that's kind of what's happening. And I think once we do this, what the goal is, it will make the UX across all of these, like, Osmosis will not just be like this whole like cross-chain swaps thing I was mentioning, right, between Cosmos chains. Like we also will be able to do that between EVM chains. Like if you want to go from today there's actually very little real composability within ETH rollups, right? Like if you want a DeFi application on Arbitrum to talk to something on Optimism, right? There's really no composability here. And I believe that the goal of IBC is like, okay, we can bring part of what IBC is just these like set of standards. And we can bring in these standards that will allow like these EVM chains to have the same level of composability that we have today in Cosmos. Like in Cosmos today, you can have a DAO on one chain, like make a swap on a different chain in order to buy an NFT on a third chain. That's just not something you have in EVM world right now. And I'm hoping that some of these new IBC standards being brought to Ethereum will enable that.
Love that. Super complete, I would say, vision, and hopefully elevating the experiences that users have across hopefully all chains. Yeah, I think you've kind of covered everything I think we previously prepared, but I guess wanted to give you some time to share anything else that you think is upcoming or things that you would love the audience to kind of challenge or test or think about.
I mean, yeah, like, on top of that, just one of our big focuses right now as well is like Bitcoin in Cosmos. Like I've just been, this is more of like a side thing, but like I've personally just been really excited. It's no secret I've always been a little bit of a Bitcoin maxi. But I was like last year when BIP 119 like didn't pass, I was a little bit disheartened with like Bitcoin development, because I thought BIP 119 was this like very important way of making Bitcoin bridging more trustless. But ever since ordinals happened, like it's actually a friend of mine that like built ordinals, and like there's just been this like renewed sense of excitement and like in Bitcoin. And it was, what was exciting to me was the fact that, oh, Bitcoiners can get excited about things, and that's what's important. And my vision for Cosmos has always been to build the app layer for Bitcoin, and so I'm just really excited for that to finally to like start repressing into that again, where it's like, okay, there's all this stuff happening on Bitcoin right now. You have ordinals, you have these BRC20 tokens, but you can't really do much with them on the Bitcoin blockchain. So how can we build systems that you can bridge them into Cosmos and like have Bitcoin be the money of the Cosmos ecosystem? And so like, today how I see it is like the Ethereum ecosystem has like money, which is ETH, and it has like an app ecosystem, which is the ecosystem they have, right? I think Bitcoin has a money with no ecosystem. Cosmos has an ecosystem with like no real
money.
base. And I think there's an opportunity for like these two to like merge efforts, like bring Bitcoin, like make Cosmos the app layer for Bitcoin. And so, there's a bunch of different things I'm working on or helping with to like enable this to be possible.
Very cool. I think this is a pretty interesting thought, and I think that's where actually I'm excited about, for example, some of the different exchanges as well in the centralized world, having some IBC compatible USDC withdrawals, such that more assets can also enter the ecosystem. And I think it's a similar line of obviously being able to bring in more Bitcoin into the ecosystem would be very valuable to hopefully creating, again, going back to the public transportation analogy, some GDP that is producible in the suburbs such that people have a reason to want to travel to the suburbs via this public transportation system. So yeah, I think that's pretty much all the questions that we've got for you today. I guess, what do you kind of see for hopefully all the other speakers and other projects? What are you most excited about to kind of see from maybe other project teams across the space?
Excited to see from other project teams across the space. I mean, definitely been interest. I've been thinking a lot about the role of crypto in this upcoming AI revolution, and like just I'm excited. I had this good podcast with Emin Gunzer from Avalanche a couple of weeks ago, and like talking a lot about AI there. We've been playing around with some stuff on Osmosis, like just for fun, just like, oh, you can actually like chat GPT like questions, like queries to the blockchain now, where like, oh, you can ask it a question, it'll generate a query and like send it and like give you responses. Maybe we'll also be doing that so you can generate transactions and stuff. But in general, like what I think is really important is like building identity and web of trust systems. And I think it's getting more and more important, like especially with like, we're entering a world right now where AI agents can like mimic your how you talk and everything. And there's going to be phishing like left and right. They're going to be contacting your friends and families and like.
Are you sure you're the real Sunny?
Yeah. And so I actually think that like building strong identity systems where like all online interactions are going to have to go through like cryptographic keys, like cryptographic identity and like on-chain and like web of trust based systems. So yeah, I think like really focusing on like I know like identity in crypto has been always like this meme of it's, oh, where is it kind of stuff, but I think that's probably actually one of the most important stuff that should be being worked on right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Sunny, for all of your insights today. I think the audience really enjoyed a lot of your topics across Appchains to the future that you see, as well as the things that you are building at Osmosis. So yeah, thanks so much for the time, and for the audience, hopefully this covers some of the things that you're curious about with Revolutionizing DeFi with Appchains. Thanks, Sunny.
Thanks. Bye.